Well, hello. Welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today, in spite of some things that are happening in the world, it is a very, very pleasant Sunday. Stuff and Things. One of the main things that's annoying me right now is the fact that the Seahawks are out of the playoffs, but that's probably all that we need to say about that. We have many things to talk about, many stuffs and things to talk about on this week's Sunday Stuff and Things, including some upcoming videos for you to enjoy. Some, I guess, I don't know what I would call this, personal news or health news about me. I don't know if it really fits into any of those categories. We won't be talking about the Seahawks because better left unsaid. We'll talk a little bit about some of my favorite games that I'm playing right now. I had somebody asking me about that, and we'll mention that a little bit. And then I want to get in probably with some pretty good depth on some feedback for the last video that we posted on Stuff and Things, where we were restoring my Dunhill, my 1962 Dunhill, or more like a deep cleaning of my 1962 Dunhill shell briar billiard. We had some good questions about that, so I just want to kind of follow up. And then, of course, we will end the episode with hashtag #AskStuffandThings, where you can ask questions of me, and I will do my best to answer them. Whew, so let's get into this. All right, I mentioned upcoming videos, so I guess we'll start with Stuff and Things Plays. The Cyberpunk series is sort of still continuing. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that, because I'm still having some issues with the recording of that series. When I'm playing the game, it's fine, but when I go through my recording software on my computer, I'm still getting a lot of stutters. It's not every episode, it's not all the time in the episodes where it is happening, but it is something that people are mentioning. It's something that I'm noticing. I've been trying very hard to solve this problem, but we'll see. I'm still posting those videos, and then also Soma is getting close to the end, but that is a really interesting game, a really great series, so you should check that out. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, gameplay videos post on Stuff and Things Plays. But for Stuff and Things, I have just recorded a first impressions video of Hearth and Home BlackHouse. This is a blend that I was almost convinced that I had done a review of, and I don't know if I was conflating it with White Knight, because I did White Knight for sure. And then I think I had either one tin or a sample of BlackHouse, and I guess I just never reviewed it, because I was going and looking back. Several people have mentioned, like, why haven't you ever reviewed BlackHouse? It seems like a blend that you should have reviewed. And I looked back through and I said, yeah, sure enough, I never reviewed BlackHouse. So I did a first impressions of BlackHouse. First impressions is supposed to be the very first time I've had a blend. And obviously I have had BlackHouse before, but it was very, very long ago. I don't really remember too much about it. And recording this video today, I was enjoying a little bit in my little Japanese pipe here. Yeah, this is good. The first impressions are quite encouraging. So I will be doing a full review of this in maybe 2 weeks' time. So 2 weeks from Wednesday when the first impressions video posts, because I think I have another video in mind that I'm going to put in between the first impressions and the final review. But BlackHouse, it's a big blend. It's one that a lot of people really enjoy, and it's one that I'm very surprised I haven't done by now. But we will remedy that very soon. Okay, so this next topic, I guess it's more just what's been going on, kind of, but many of you may or may not know, that's a weird way to start a sentence, some of you may or may not know that I wear contacts. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but sometimes when I'm speaking to you, my right eye gets very squinty and weird looking. I'll notice that sometimes when I'm editing videos, and I'll be like, oh, that eye is about half the size of the other eye at the moment, or it's halfway closed. I typically don't have too much issue wearing contacts if I've had them in for, you know, a long day. My eyes might get a little tired having them in, and then I'll start getting that weird, like, droopy eye thing. But I don't even know why I'm talking about this exactly, but over a month ago, I was getting to the end of my pack of contacts that I had. And I ordered some more pairs, And I kind of left it sort of late, but I had ordered it where I thought I had enough time that I could leave my last pair in. I take them out at night, but wearing them consecutively or consecutive days, you're only supposed to wear them a couple weeks, the kind of contacts that I wear, but I can sometimes stretch that out to a month. And so I ordered them knowing, okay, I'll have to stretch these out a little bit longer, but it should be fine. Well, for some reason, that initial order that I put in still has not arrived, and it's been over a month. I realized when I looked at the tracking information that they were coming from Poland for some reason. And so I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to wait a while to get these new contacts. I hope I can survive. It got to the point where basically the protein deposits that had built up on my old contacts were so bad that it felt like, it's hard to explain if you've never worn contacts, but if you can imagine, when the contacts are fresh and new, I don't really feel them in at all. And then if maybe I've worn them for 16, 17 hours, then I can start maybe feeling them. My eyes get kind of dry, may have to re-wet them. But when it gets to the point where there are protein deposits on them, if you can imagine like a little piece of glass, like a sort of rounded piece of glass, but still has sharp edges. And imagine taking like super glue and gluing those directly onto your eyeball, just like a couple on each eyeball. That's annoying enough. That's painful enough. But then imagine blinking your delicate little eyelids over those pieces of glass that are embedded in your eyeball. And that's kind of what it feels like to be wearing the contacts that I was wearing. It was immensely painful, immensely annoying. My eyes were watering all the time. And many of you will say, like, why the hell were you even wearing those contacts? It's because I hate wearing glasses, number one. I loathe wearing glasses. I have a pair of glasses, but again, they're so old that the prescription is basically, I can see slightly better through them than if I didn't have my glasses in at all. But it's not great. I don't know. I guess I could drive with them on, but it's kind of iffy. They constantly just slide down my nose all the time. They drive me insane. So when I'm working especially, and especially with it being rainy all the time here when I've been working, I need to wear my contacts. And so I just kept waiting. I'd be checking that tracking information. Like, no, they left Poland a month ago. They're still not here. They're still not here. They're still not here. And then finally, I just had to order from a different site. Those have finally came. And I guess it was yesterday or the day before, I got those new contacts. I ripped my old ones out, popped the new ones in, and was just flabbergasted by how well I could see again. It's like, oh yeah, that's what being able to see is like. And I guess the only reason I tell this story is because I have a tendency to ignore health issues sometimes, and obviously contacts aren't a health issue, but it's a quality of life issue. And as far as like other health things go, sometimes I ignore those as well. And it was a good reminder to me not to let that stuff slide and not to wait till the last minute. Like, if I'm running out of contacts, I should order them, giving myself plenty of time to make sure that I get a new pair, because the quality of life impact that had on me was monumental. And I know probably some of you out there will be like, it's probably going to be fine. Oh, I'll probably wait till later. It could be like, I don't know, it could be anything. What's that thing on my skin here? I'll ignore it. I do that all the time. And some of it is, I guess, a slightly misguided sense of machismo or something, like, screw it, I'll be fine. And a lot of times it is fine. But I guess the moral of this story is you should never get yourself to the point where you are wearing shards of glass in your eyeballs. Take care of that stuff first. That's my message to you. Now, some of you may notice my snazzy new t-shirt I'm wearing here. You may or may not know who this weird little cartoon character is, but I've had a couple people ask me, like, oh, what games are you enjoying right now? They're seeing the games that I'm playing on the channel. I have been playing a couple games. They see the games I'm playing on the channel and they wonder if I'm playing anything else. That was the question that I was asked. I've been playing a couple games lately, one of which is this. This is Katamari Damacy. It's the Katamari reroll, which was put out, was it last year? It was a remake, or I guess like a remaster of the original Katamari game. It is a very, very weird game. And it's something that I got on Switch and I had barely touched it. And then a couple weeks ago, I started playing it again, and I started realizing how much I loved it. I think it's a fantastic game. The premise is sort of hard to describe, but it's, I don't know, the aesthetic of it, the soundtrack, it's so weird and so ridiculous. You are basically this tiny little prince. This guy here, he is the prince of the cosmos. His father, the king of all the cosmos, destroyed all the stars in the sky. And so he gives you the task of going down to Earth and making new stars. And the way you do that is by rolling this thing called a katamari. It's this little ball that he rolls, and if you roll over something that is smaller than that ball, it will pick it up. And then eventually that ball will get bigger and bigger, and then you can roll it over bigger things. And eventually you get to the point where you start out rolling up like paper clips and strawberries and pieces of sushi off people's tables. But then you'll start rolling up their cat or their dog. Eventually you'll start rolling up people, and then cars and like bulls and elephants. And eventually you can roll up buildings and whole islands and giant bridges. It's so weird. The aesthetic is so strange. The soundtrack is amazing. I love it. If you haven't tried Katamari Damacy Reroll, it's available on all the current consoles, I think, or at least it was PS4, Xbox One, I think, Xbox, at least PS4, Switch. Try it out. It's hilarious. It's amazing. I love it. Katamari Damacy. And then the other game I've been playing is Ghost of Tsushima, which I got for Christmas from my brother. And I was like, this will probably be fun. I have found myself enthralled with this game. It is an open world style action game. It is loosely based on the first Mongol invasion of Japan that happened in 1274, I think, or maybe 1276, around there. It is not tremendously historically accurate, and someone like me who is kind of a nerd about Japanese things, I definitely noticed the fact that he is wearing armor that maybe he wouldn't have worn at the time. The main character, Jin Sakai, who you play as, he is using a katana, which didn't really exist then. They wore tachis, and I don't know. There's all sorts of things that are wrong with the game as far as historical accuracy, and it takes place on the Isle of Tsushima, where the Mongols did come initially, but as happened in actual history, they just took over the island, and then they were eventually driven off when they went to the mainland. And there was the kamikaze, the divine wind. Basically, a typhoon came up. There's some controversy as to how much of this actually happened, but the history shows, at least the Japanese and the Mongols at the time, said that a huge wind came, destroyed their fleet, and basically they were driven off, and then they tried again in 1781, or 1281, I think, and basically the same thing happened. So anyway, getting all that history aside, what's true and what's not, the game is set on the Isle of Tsushima. You play a samurai who survived the initial Mongol attack, and you are going sort of a guerrilla fighter. You're finding Mongol encampments. You're running around doing little side quests, helping out the local inhabitants. You are building up your arsenal of weapons, learning new techniques. It's just super fun. Obviously, the subject matter is something that I enjoy, and it's very much based on kind of the golden age of Japanese cinema, like Kurosawa films, samurai films like that. In fact, there's even a Kurosawa mode that you can put on where it puts this really high contrasty black and white filter over the whole game. But I'm really enjoying it, and you should check it out. This is my 1962 Dunhill Shell Briar Billiard. Last week, I posted a video in which I did a very, very deep cleaning of this pipe. And it's the kind of cleaning that you don't do very often, but it's something that if you have a pipe long enough and it has a vulcanite stem, you may have to do. People seem to enjoy that video a lot, but there were some questions that people had about that video and about the process I used to clean this pipe. So I'm going to go through some of these questions and I guess just expand on that video a little bit. First of all, people said they wanted to know about OxiClean. OxiClean is a product that you use in your laundry, I guess, and some people mentioned, why didn't I use OxiClean to clean the pipe stem? And I guess, first of all, I didn't have any on me at the time, but what you can do is you can make a bath of OxiClean and water. You can soak the stem in that OxiClean and it will apparently take away some of that corrosion. I have tried that in the past, or not corrosion, I keep saying corrosion, oxidation. I've tried that in the past, and I've had some success with that if the oxidation on the pipe stem is not very thick, if it's just a lighter amount of oxidation. This particular stem had a ton of oxidation, and I just thought I'm going to have to go with sort of the nuclear option. And did I say nuclear? Nuclear option. People always yell at me for doing that. I'm sorry, I grew up with George Bush saying nuclear all the time. I had to use the nuclear option and just go with the sanding. If I had just unlimited resources and time, I would have done a buffing wheel. I've been able to use a buffing wheel to clean pipe stems in the past, and it is so much nicer. If you just get some polishing compound on a buffing wheel, you... Sorry, I'm choking. If you use some buffing compound on a... Oh my Lord. Polishing compound on a buffing wheel, you can take that oxidation right off. It is so nice and it works so well. But I didn't have access to one right now. My brother actually owns one, but he doesn't have it set up or anything. So I used the sandpaper method. Next, people said, hey, there was still oxidation on that stem. Why didn't you get all of it off? Again, that's just more a time and effort thing. If I were getting this pipe ready to sell, I would definitely get it to the point where there was no oxidation left on the stem at all. I just wanted to clean up the worst of it, and I also wanted to do it within a time period that worked for me. I didn't want to spend hours on it, so that's why. Other people have said, how often should you ream your pipe? It really depends on the pipe and how often you smoke it. This one, I can't really give you a timetable. I can just tell you what kind of criteria I use. If there's like more than 1/8 of an inch, what is that in millimeters? 3 or 4 millimeters. If there's more than that building up in the pipe, that's probably the point where you need to start reaming it. Because if you get enough, you can actually cause the pipe bowl to crack, because you've got this force of the cake that is built up inside there, and then when you add heat to that, you can get a cracked pipe bowl, and you don't want that. You want enough cake to protect the walls of the bowl, but you don't want so much that it actually is counterproductive. Next, somebody's asked what's the best method to clean the pipe stem. I mentioned the buffing wheel already. And then several other people said, why did you use isopropyl alcohol when you were cleaning out the shank? Why didn't you use grain alcohol? I've used grain alcohol before. It works just fine. I just don't have any. I didn't have any on me at the time. I like using whiskey. Whiskey works well, and then it does impart a sweeter flavor. If you use isopropyl, it'll work really well, but you don't want to use the pipe for several days afterwards because it will taste horribly. Some people use something like Everclear that's about, what is Everclear, 95% alcohol or so. I use isopropyl that's 99.1 or whatever. Pretty much any grain alcohol will work okay as well. I would recommend whiskey or something like Everclear, but whiskey does taste pretty nice and it's sweeter, and you could probably use the pipe more quickly after you use that alcohol. But I think that's all the questions I had about this restoration. Oh, other people said, how would you finish the pipe as far as waxing it if you could do whatever you wanted, if you weren't limited to using something like the Halcyon and the Paragon wax that I did use? My ultimate is to actually use carnauba wax, and again, using a buffing wheel. Spinning the wheel, getting that carnauba wax on there, and then putting it all over the pipe, the stem and the bowl, the stummel, the shank, everything. it's great. And it works really well, and it protects the pipe. But again, I don't have access to a buffing wheel. So hopefully that answered most of your questions about this restoration / deep cleaning of the Dunhill 1962 Shellbriar Billiard. But gang, now it is time for hashtag #AskStuffandThings, and that is where I answer questions from you. If you have a question for me and you would like me to answer it on the Sunday Stuff and Things, tweet at @SATBradley with the hashtag #AskStuffandThings. Also, if you are a Patreon supporter, you can write to me on there, and I also try to get some questions from YouTube comments. I know some people do not like using Twitter, and I can understand that, and so YouTube works as well. But the first question comes from Chris Coffey at Lutheran Kleinen. Chris says, "Hey Bradley, any idea when bulk blends like Nightcap might be available again?" That's a good question. When Peterson, when STG got the rights to use the Dunhill recipes under the Peterson name, I was hoping that all those bulk blends would be back soon, because when they were doing them under the Dunhill name, you could get the biggest, I guess the most popular Dunhill blends in bulk. You could get Nightcap, you could get Elizabethan mixture, you could get a couple others. I don't know. I haven't heard any plans, whether or not they're, if I can make a sentence here, I have not heard whether or not they have plans to make those bulk blends available again. If any of you have information out there, put it in the comment box below. Thank you. Next, from Tyler Brubaker. Hey Tyler. At Tyler Brubaker 20, "Hey Bradley, long time no see. I was wondering, over the years that you have enjoyed the pipe hobby, have you experienced any negative effects on your body?" That's a good question. It's kind of hard to say, because you would have to take away pipes from the equation and then say, okay, how do I feel? I used to smoke cigarettes, years ago, and I was a habitual smoker. And then I stopped entirely and felt a lot better after I stopped. And then adding pipes to that did not seem to really make any difference. Like, I got up to a point where I was like, wow, that actually did make a huge difference that I stopped smoking. And then putting pipes on top of that did not make me feel any worse. So as far as like lung capacity and all that stuff, it's so much better than when I used to smoke cigarettes. So I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you like, oh, you'll be fine if you indulge in the pipe hobby. But as far as my personal experience goes, as far as things that I can see and feel, I haven't noticed any adverse effects. Whether or not something horrible is happening inside, I can't tell you. I don't know. But I feel okay. I feel good. Last, from Antonio Rico at BonyTony01. "Hey Bradley, I began watching your videos a few months ago when I started smoking a pipe, and I love your content. My question is, what past century would you choose to live in? I personally could see you as an 18th century sailor on a merchant ship." That's an interesting question, and it's something that I have thought about in the past. Like, where would I want to go? If I could go back in time, what would I like to experience? If I'm being kind of boring and honest, I don't think, as far as a past century, there's anywhere that I would rather be other than the century in which I was born. Because for the most part, life sucks in the past. There was a lot more disease. There was a lot more violence. There was a lot more chance that you could die a horrible death. And if you think about it, even people who are considered poor, and I guess it also depends on where would you be, in centuries in the past. Like, would you be living in Europe, or would you be living in Africa, or, where would you be living? But for the most part, the quality of life is so much better now than it has ever been in the past. People like to think about the past as though it was this, Shangri-La or utopia sometimes, or they think about, oh, when people were living as hunter-gatherers, that's the way people should have lived. But you could also be killed at any moment. You lived to be about 40 probably, and, there were a lot of issues back then. Throughout most of human history, things have been much worse than they are now. In spite of what it may seem like, in spite of what you see on the news, there has probably been no better time to be alive than the time we are in now. But if I wasn't thinking about dying a violent, horrible death or getting some awful disease or any of those other things, or the fact that I would be blind because I cannot see anything without contacts or glasses, let's put all that to the side. Something that might be fun to experience. I would not want to be a merchant sailor in the 18th century, because that would be just horrible. If I think about it, I've read plenty of books about, you know, the age of sail. I've read the Hornblower series. I've read the Aubrey Maturin series. I love those stories. I don't think I'd want to be there. Again, violent clashes with pirates and or other navies, cannonballs smashing through the side of your ship and getting the huge piece of wooden shrapnel in you, which would fester, limbs cut off, horrible rations packed in like sardines in a tiny, tiny boat. I don't think so. I think maybe living in Hawaii in the 17th century, 16th century, when it was, well, even then they had human sacrifices. Maybe Japan in like the early 16th or late 15th century, before other Europeans had come there. Because if I were a weird white dude, and that was the only weird white dude they had ever seen, then maybe I would get some sort of special dispensation and people would think I was cool because I was the only like freak that they had ever seen with blue eyes. And, you know, because it was fairly clean, the standards of living at the time were pretty good, depending on, you know, what your station was within that society. Maybe there, and then, you know, it was cool. As long as I didn't get involved in some sort of war where my head could very easily be chopped off, or someone tried to tell me that I had to kill myself, that might be fun. There's a lot of eras and time periods, things that I can imagine would be very cool and adventurous, but then when you think of the actual nitty-gritty of living in that time, none of them seem as appealing. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy living here, now, where I am. I guess that's kind of boring. But gang, that's pretty much it for hashtag AskStuffandThings, but now it is time for the best part of the show, and that is where we thank the Patreon supporters. We cannot thank you enough for supporting the channels on Patreon. If you would like to support the channels, there is a link in the description box below. But every week, those who support the channels at $25 or more get a special shout out. We'd like to say thank you. We'd like to do it every week. We'd like to say thank you this week to Ryan McFadin, Kirk Crompton, Private Eye, Cody Striegler, Glenn, Gus, Jason Buckner, Jen O'Side, John Leone, Krisztian Kovacs, Joshua Jackson, and Gloria Phillips. Thank you all so much for being shout-out tier Patreon supporters. And now we have to thank the Maniacs, the crazy people who support the channels at $100 a month. People like Peter Straub, Bob Magee, and David Gaudreau. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you all so much for watching and liking and sharing and subscribing. Be sure to watch the First Impressions video of Hearth and Home BlackHouse this Wednesday. Also, Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Stuff and Things Plays. Fun gameplay videos for your perusal. But until next time, until we meet again, I've been your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. This has been some coffee. This has been Stuff and Things Plays. I'm going to drink this now. I'll see you later.